Should prayer be mandatory in schools? This question has sparked many heated debates over the years. It's a controversy that stands at the intersection of religious freedom and the separation of church and state. It's a delicate balancing act, a tightrope walk over a chasm of differing beliefs and constitutional rights. And it's a question that continues to challenge us as we grapple with the implications for students of different faiths and no faith. Let us delve deeper into this topic by first understanding the history of prayer in schools. The history of prayer in schools is complex and has seen many legal battles. At the heart of this issue, we find a delicate balance between religious freedom and the principle of separation of church and state. In the early days of American education, prayer was commonplace in schools. Many schools began their days with a Christian prayer or a reading from the Bible. This practice was largely uncontested, as the country was predominantly Christian and the notion of religious diversity was not as prevalent as it is today. However, as the American melting pot began to simmer with an increasing variety of religious beliefs, the question of whether Christian prayer should be mandatory in schools began to stir controversy. This led to a series of legal battles that would change the landscape of American education. The first significant case was Engel v. Vitale in 1962. The Supreme Court ruled that state officials violated the First Amendment when they wrote a prayer to be recited by New York's schoolchildren. The court argued that by writing the prayer and encouraging its recitation in public schools, the government was promoting a particular religion, thus breaching the wall of separation between church and state. Following closely was the case of Abington School District v. Schempp in 1963. In this case, the Supreme Court declared school-sponsored Bible reading in public schools to be unconstitutional. This decision reinforced the precedent set by Engel versus Vitale, further establishing the principle that the government should not promote any specific religious practices in public schools. These landmark cases have profoundly shaped the American education system. They've set the stage for an ongoing debate that asks whether prayer, specifically Christian prayer, should be mandatory in schools. This debate challenges us to reconcile the principles of religious freedom and state neutrality towards religion, a task that is as complex as it is essential. These cases have set the precedent for the ongoing debate on mandatory prayer in schools. The history of prayer in schools serves as a reminder of the complexity of this issue, one that continues to evolve and generate debate in our society. The issue of mandatory prayer in schools is viewed differently by various sections of society. Now let's delve into the heart of the matter: the perspectives. On one side of the spectrum, there are those who vigorously advocate for mandatory Christian prayer in schools. Their reasoning: they believe it provides a moral grounding for students. This group argues that Christian prayer instills values such as love, forgiveness, and humility, values they see as essential for character building. They're also quick to point out that the freedom of religion clause in the Constitution should extend to schools, allowing students to practice their faith freely, even in an educational setting. However, it's not a one-sided debate. Opposing this perspective are those who firmly believe in the separation of church and state. They argue that making Christian prayer mandatory in schools infringes on this principle. They see it as a move that could potentially blur the lines between education and religious indoctrination. This group also raises concerns about the respect for non-Christian students. They question, what about those who follow other faiths or no faith at all? Wouldn't mandatory Christian prayer in schools marginalize them, causing feelings of exclusion? Moreover, they argue that schools should be a neutral space where students of all faiths or no faith at all can learn and grow without feeling pressured to conform to a particular religious belief. They believe that the focus of schools should be on providing a well-rounded education rather than promoting a specific religious practice. While these perspectives might seem polar opposites, it's important to remember that they both stem from a place of concern. Concern for the moral upbringing of our future generations, and concern for the preservation of individual rights and freedoms. It's a complex issue with no easy answers. Both sides present compelling arguments. Let's summarize the arguments for and against compulsory Christian prayer in schools. On one side, proponents argue that mandatory prayer provides a moral compass for students. They believe that prayer can instill virtues such as humility, compassion, and respect, thereby molding future generations into moral and upright citizens. Furthermore, they argue that mandatory prayer aligns with the principle of religious freedom. They contend that by allowing Christian prayer in schools, We validate and respect the religious beliefs of Christian students, a significant demographic in many communities. On the flip side, opponents of mandatory prayer uphold the principle of separation of church and state. They argue that the classroom is a secular space, and that introducing religious practices, such as prayer, blurs the line between religion and state. They further contend that mandatory prayer could infringe upon the rights of non-Christian students who may feel uncomfortable or marginalized by a practice that does not align with their beliefs. Moreover, critics point out that schools are a melting pot of diverse faiths and ideologies. Therefore, imposing one religion's practices could potentially lead to feelings of exclusion among students of different faiths or those with no religious affiliations. Each argument has its merits and drawbacks, highlighting the complexity of this issue. The debate on whether prayer should be mandatory in schools is far from over. This conversation carries immense weight as it shapes not just the future of education but also the landscape of religious freedom. It's a delicate balance between respecting individual beliefs and maintaining the separation of church and state, a balance that is unique to each society. As we've explored the history of prayer in schools, the legal battles, and the various perspectives on the matter, it's clear that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. The potential impact on students of different faiths, or no faith, remains a significant consideration. In the end, it's not about who's right or wrong, but about understanding and respecting the diverse range of beliefs that make up our society. We encourage you to consider the viewpoints presented, to question, to learn, and most importantly, to form your own opinion. Feel free to share your thoughts on this topic in the comments section, and remember, every perspective matters in this ongoing conversation.
We are constantly making new content to help you on your walk of faith. Please like and subscribe to make sure you stay up to date with the latest content.